Oops. Alrighty, so let's take a look at what we have to do. Oops, I'm on mute. Whoops, sorry, I was still on mute. Okay, so taking a look at what we have to do for today. Now, we were looking at Chapter 15, Section 3, right, on Wednesday, looking at conflict with Native Americans. Okay, we're pretty much done with Chapter 15, Section 3. There's just one more section in the chapter that we have to get through before we can take our quiz, all right? So, we don't have school on Monday. That's first and foremost, right? You don't want to show up here on Monday. You'll be the only one, okay? So, I'm not going to see you all in 7th period until next Wednesday, okay? Next Wednesday, we're going to wrap up Chapter 15. We're going to look at Section 4, which is about farmers and sort of demanding that they get fair wages and everything like that. So we'll finish up Chapter 15 on Wednesday, and we will take our Chapter 15 quiz next Friday, okay? So I'm giving you a heads up, a week heads up. So what's really important that we do over this weekend, we won't have any homework tonight. However, right here on the agenda, it's really, really important you get in all your Chapter 14 missing and late work by this Sunday, May 30th for credit, right? If you don't get that turned in, then unfortunately you will not be able to get points for those assignments. So try to end off 8th grade on a good note, right? You want to end off with a grade that you're proud of, okay? Don't let these missing assignments drag down your grade, okay? So that's first and foremost, all right? I'm going to put this up again one more time for everyone, right? And I'll put it in the chat, okay? So remember, we're getting participation points for joining the Pear Deck, right? Go ahead and join so you'll get some easy points to boost your grade, okay? So it'll give us all another minute or so before we get started. Okay, it looks like we've got a good amount of students on the Pear Deck. If you haven't joined already, I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time, as well as the code. Let me know if you have any trouble getting on, right? XVFPRR is the code that you want to use, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. So for today, we're going to sort of take a break from looking at Chapter 15, and what I'm going to have us do is revisit Reconstruction and sort of the aftermath of Reconstruction, okay? So we talked about Reconstruction, right, the period after the Civil War, but we're going to see that it doesn't just affect the people living during that time period. It's going to affect, right, their children, their grandchildren, people for generations to come, okay? So we're going to take a look at sort of how does what happened during Reconstruction affect people in the future, okay? So let's take a look at our Pear Deck for today. Right, so looking at what did we learn in Chapter 14, right, we're going to see that we've talked about, right, the goal of Reconstruction, and the goal of Reconstruction was multifaceted, meaning there's multiple parts here, right? There wasn't only one goal of Reconstruction. Many, many things were trying to get done during this time period, right? So here are some of the examples that we put in our Reconstruction projects, right? The goal of Reconstruction was to restore the United States, right, to have Southern states rejoin the United States, was to give everyone fair rights and fair laws, right, end slavery, fix what was wrong about the country, rebuild everything, make everyone get along, right, rebuild the South in particular, right? All the damage that was done, rebuild and reunify the nation, so make amends to relationships, right? Help freed slaves gain their rights, right? All of these really important things, okay? So in our project, we might have only mentioned a couple of these, right? But let's take a look at how we feel about Reconstruction, okay? So answer this prompt, right? In your opinion, was Reconstruction successful at reunifying the United States? Right, so there's multiple goals of Reconstruction, but we're looking at just one right now. Was it successful at reunifying the United States? Okay, I'll give us about 10 or so more seconds to respond. Then I'll lock our screen. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Let's see what everyone says. Okay, so interesting. We are, for the most part, saying yes, it was successful at reunifying the United States, right? Some of us are not convinced it happened all the way. We're kind of in the middle, but for the most part, we're leaning towards the green, right? We agree. Okay, let's take a look at this next prompt, right? So, in your opinion, was Reconstruction successful at providing equal rights for former slaves? How do we feel about this question? Okay, I'll give us 5 more seconds. Let's take a look in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty. Okay, so different response here, right? While we said that it was successful in reunifying the United States, we're having a different opinion here, right? We don't think it was successful or as successful at providing equal rights for former slaves, right? The majority of us are saying no, it did not do that. Okay? And so we've touched on this a little bit before, and these are all things we've talked about, right? So, in some ways, yes, Reconstruction was successful, right? Let's look at the things it was able to accomplish, okay? The Union was reunited, right? We were the United States again, not the United States and the Confederacy, right? The South got help recovering from all the damage that was done. The Southern economy was rebuilt, and we can't forget about the Civil Rights Amendments, right? The 13th, 14th, and 15th. Abolished slavery, granted citizenship, guaranteed the right to vote. Okay, so there definitely were some wins, some successes during Reconstruction, but there were also a lot of failures, right? We see that especially in the South, society was segregated. We have black codes and Jim Crow laws, which are going to really restrict where people can and can't participate in society, right? There's voter restrictions such as literacy tests and poll taxes, right, that are going to limit, try to disenfranchise, deny African Americans their right to vote. We see the formation of hate groups such as the KKK who are going to use violence and scare tactics to try to prohibit or limit, right, African American voting, as well as try to sort of restrict, right, maybe where they're going to participate in society or live or where they can get jobs, things like that, right? And so, sort of, if we take a holistic look at this, right, African Americans are not equal, right, when it comes to economically, politically, or socially to their white counterparts, right, especially in the South, where things like segregation were much more apparent than in the North, right? Because we know that sort of we looked at the end, the Compromise of 1877. The North and the federal government said, we're going to stay out of Reconstruction. The South, you can handle that on your own. And while they promised to uphold these things, they did not follow through with their word, right? So for today, what we're going to look at, we want to extend our knowledge. We want to connect what we already know about Reconstruction to learn about the effect it had on the people living after, right? So we're going to see that what happened during Reconstruction, some of these negative outcomes on our Jamboard, how do those continue in the years to come, right? What effect does it have on people who lived in the South? Okay, so we're going to look at one example in particular today, right? And so we see the civil rights movement, which is probably something we've heard about, right? We probably might recognize some of these photos or some of these important figures and events, right? Like Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, the nonviolent sit-ins that people did to resist segregation, things like this, okay? So the civil rights movement is particularly popular and gaining traction and attention in the 1950s and 60s. And what the goal of the civil rights movement is to end racial discrimination or people being treated unfairly because of their race, to try to stop disenfranchisement, again, so that's people being denied the right to vote, and also racial segregation, right? The separation of people according to their race, right? Whether it's in transportation or schools or what door you enter a restaurant, what park you can play at, what water fountain you can drink out of, right? We're going to see that segregation really affected all aspects of day-to-day life, okay? So we're looking at a particular example today. If we think back to Reconstruction, we learned about the court case of Plessy versus Ferguson, right? This idea of separate but equal, which allowed segregation to take place, okay? So in December 1955, we might have heard this story before, Rosa Parks infamously refuses to give up her seat on a public bus, and she is arrested for this, okay? So especially in the South, this happens in Montgomery, Alabama. Public transportation is segregated. So if we can see here from these pictures, there are specific sections in the bus depending on who you are, what race you are. So the front part of the bus was reserved for white men and women, and the back of the bus was designated for black men and women. Right? You're supposed to sit in your designated area. Rosa Parks was doing just this. However, what happens is all of the seats are full and more people come on the bus, and she's expected to give up her seat to a white man. And when she doesn't get up, she's arrested for this. Okay? So take a moment for a second. Have you ever heard of the word boycott? And if so, what does it mean? Okay, perfect. So Tanner, can you share with us your definition of boycott?
I said boycotting is like to stop using or buying from something.
Perfect, right? So that could be an example of a boycott. You're going to stop using something or stop buying something, right? Cruz gave a little bit more detail, right? This is another example of a boycott, to refuse a certain law, right? So it's a number of things, right? But you're either not doing something, right? So either you're not buying something, you're not using something, you're not participating in something, but you are refusing to take action, okay? So we're going to see here, this is how it starts, right? Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat. She's arrested and fined money. Now, she's not the first person to refuse to give up her seat. We're going to see this has happened to a couple people before her. But in this instance, it gains a lot of attention, okay? And people, right, the African American community in particular living in Montgomery, really sees this as a sign that they want to take action, right, as a result, right? They don't agree with the way that she's treated. They don't agree with the law in general, that they even have to sit in a separate part of the bus and are expected to give up their seat if the bus is full, right? And so they come together to show, right, Montgomery, and also becomes the world, right? But they think these laws are unfair and they want to let people know why they're unfair, okay? So we're going to watch a short video real quick that's going to give us some more information as to what exactly happens, why the Montgomery bus boycott is significant. Pay attention specifically to, after Rosa Parks is arrested, what do people do next? Okay, so what happens after she's arrested? What are people coming together to do?
In Montgomery, Alabama, people looked at how they were being impacted negatively by their society, and they assumed responsibility for change.
Joanne Robinson was an English professor at Alabama State University, and she headed up an organization called the Women's Political Council. Joanne Robinson had an episode on the Montgomery bus where she is accosted by a bus driver. She leaves the bus, in terror. She thought the bus driver was going to hit her as he demanded she sit in the black-only section in an almost empty bus. When she talked to other women in the Women's Political Council about this episode, she found out that they had similar experiences. There were a number of arrests in 1955 of black women who were violating the segregation ordinance on the buses. And on the night of December 1st, when Rosa Parks was arrested, Joanne Robinson springs into action, and they actually execute this plan to initiate a bus boycott.
At the time, most people rode the bus to kind of get around. There weren't as many cars on the road. So you begin to realize that if we don't ride the buses, we're able to kind of break the system to a great degree.
Joanne Robinson comes on campus late that night with a couple of students, runs off 50,000 flyers. The next morning, between classes, they pass out these flyers. She calls the civil rights attorney, Fred Gray. She calls E.D. Nixon, labor organizer, really the recognized leader of Black Montgomery. And they decide to endorse the boycott. They organize the Montgomery Improvement Association to execute and to coordinate the activities surrounding the Montgomery bus boycott. And they select this newcomer, Martin Luther King, to head up the Montgomery Improvement Association. Martin Luther King weaves into Montgomery ideas about love and civil disobedience, overcoming adversity.
And the people of Montgomery were willing not only to listen, but to act on this.
I was the NAACP Youth Council president, and I participated in the boycott. I walked to school, and we just saw the empty buses go by because there were no Black people on them.
At the time that this movement began here, we had about 50,000 African Americans living in Montgomery. And there were pretty close to 50,000 Black people who worked together during this bus boycott.
We stayed off the buses and found other ways to get to where we needed to go.
And so they bought station wagons. And they had an actual route, just like buses have routes.
For several weeks, I was a volunteer driver every day, going out and just hauling people to work or to school.
So people just didn't walk. They rode, but they rode in a system that they created. 382 days. That's a long time. Can you imagine how empowered people felt? It's like, we did what?
The Montgomery bus boycott says to the nation that segregation is no longer the law of the land, and that the formula for attacking segregation in all of its facets is going to be nonviolent civil disobedience on one hand and litigation on the other.
The boycott was one of the greatest examples of civic engagement of the 20th century.
Okay, so we see there what happens afterwards, right? Thousands and thousands of people are going to boycott or refuse to ride the bus. Now, why is that significant, right? The bus is not going to get money, right? Because you have to buy a pass to ride the bus. So buses are not going to be receiving money, right? People are going to find other ways to go to work. And this sends a message, right? That we're not going to ride the bus until these racist laws are gotten rid of, right? It sends the message there, right? That segregation is not okay, and I'm going to refuse to ride the bus to sort of show, right, what I believe in. Okay, so going back to our Pear Deck, right, we're going to fill in this cause and effect chart, right? So this starts, right, with Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus and being arrested. Now you're going to fill in what happens next, right? What happens as a result of this? How do people come together to show, right, they disagree with bus segregation laws? Okay, so it'll give us about a minute or so to think about this question as well as fill in our responses. Right, so what do people come together to do after she's arrested, right? What happens after this all takes place? Okay, take a couple more seconds to wrap up your thoughts. Okay, so Kyla Snell, can you share with the class your response for this question?
Yes, sorry, it's a little loud right now because there's construction going on. But
Okay,
I said attention is brought to her and what she did, and it gets people talking about whether it is fair or not.
perfect. Awesome, right? So it not only brings attention to what's going on, but it starts the conversation of people asking themselves, right? Are these segregation laws fair or not? Okay. How about Katie Ho? What was your response for this, looking at the cause and the effect?
I said that people would stand up for her and boycott the buses.
Perfect, right? That's how they respond, right? What happens after this starts the bus boycott, right? So some of us saying that she's giving hope to others. Oh, Amna, would you like to share?
Yeah, just a second. So her arrest sparked the 382-day boycott of the Montgomery bus system. It also led to a 1956 Supreme Court decision banning segregation on public transportation.
Perfect. That's an awesome segue into the next part. Okay. So we talk about what it does, right? Automatically, we see the Women's Political Council is going to make flyers encouraging people to boycott, right? Our new vocab word, to stop using the bus system. We see thousands of people are participating and they boycott the bus for over a year. Okay. So they find other ways to get around, whether that's walking, riding a bike, carpooling with other people, but it's important to consider, right? At this point in time, the bus is probably the most convenient way to get around, right? And so they're giving up their time to make it known what they stand for, right? And so during this time while they're boycotting the bus, they're going to demand bus segregation laws be revoked. So they want to get rid of bus segregation laws, right? They don't think it's fair, okay? So let's take a look at this question because Amna just told us, right? This goes on for over a year. So why do you think protesters boycotted the bus system for over a year, even when it might have been easier and faster for them to ride the bus? Right? What do you think inspired them to stay committed for so long? Okay, I'll give us a couple more seconds to put down our responses. Okay, so I'm going to call on Elizabeth M. Elizabeth M., what was your idea for this question?
I said to get the attention and the rights that they deserve.
Perfect, right? They're going to fight for how long it takes to get what they want, right? In this case, it's to stop these racist bus segregation laws, right? How about Edward? How did you word your answer?
I said that they were gonna keep protesting until the bus system said okay.
Right. They're going to protest until they got what they wanted, right? Until the bus system listened to them, right, and would integrate the bus, right? So we have to think of sort of all of the commitment that it took, right? If you think about you not driving your car or having your parents drive you anywhere for the next year, right? You would either walk or bike. A year is a really long time for you, right? Especially because driving in your car will get you there a lot faster, right? But this is the sacrifice that people made, not only to bring attention to the injustices that were happening, right? But also to finally achieve their desired outcome, right? So we see that it takes over a year for them protesting before the city of Montgomery rules that any law segregating buses is unconstitutional, right? So the laws finally changed. And then in December, Montgomery buses are integrated, meaning that people can sit freely, right? There's not going to be sections designated based on your race, okay? But it's important to look at, right? We've been looking at Reconstruction. This bus boycott takes place 90 years after the Civil War, right? 90 years after Reconstruction, when we were supposed to be working towards granting and guaranteeing equal rights to African Americans, right? It takes 90 years, and then it takes one more year of protesting and refusing, boycotting to ride the bus to create change, right? So this has been a long time coming, right? If we think about it that way, that these people have been treated unfairly for over 90 years at this point, right? So let's take a second to consider, how did the failures of Reconstruction affect people who lived after the Civil War? Okay, I'm going to call on Ella Garcia because I see your response and I think you summed it up perfectly.
I said people still have to do work after the Reconstruction and try to fix what they didn't do right during the Reconstruction.
Perfect, right? So all of the things that we were looking at earlier, right? These Jim Crow laws, right? Voter restriction. Okay, while not that, of course, affected people who were living during that time period, but because it never got fixed, it's going to affect, right, their children, their grandchildren, their family members, right? And now we see that it's sort of their duty in a way to fix what wasn't able to be accomplished during Reconstruction, right? And so we had a lot of really, really good ideas in our responses there, right? They're still being treated poorly, right? So people living after the end of the Civil War had to dedicate their time and their energy to fix the racist laws put in place during Reconstruction, right? So we see that it continues to affect people in the future, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy for these things to go away and for people to finally get the equal protection, equal opportunities they were promised, right? And so at the end of the day, we see here that the bus system is integrated, which is the goal they wanted to accomplish. But at the end of the day, that's only one aspect of their life, right? There's a lot of things that still need to be improved upon, and it's going to take a lot more time and energy in order to do that. Okay, so this is sort of seen as one of the first big wins in the civil rights movement. You'll certainly learn more about it when you get into high school, but it's important for us to sort of know that when you're going to learn about this more in high school, you can connect and you can look back to Reconstruction to see how, right, people were being treated this way as a result to what happened, or in this case, failed to happen earlier in history, right? It's one big cause and effect relationship, okay? So this was a small win, right? The buses were integrated, but definitely there were still things that could have been improved upon, and that's what the civil rights movement is going to work towards, right? Overall, in all aspects of life, work on improving, right, the opportunities, the rights of everyone. Okay, so we're going to stop there for today. Again, you don't have any homework for tonight, but it's really, really important. If you have any Chapter 14 missing or late work, please get that in by this Sunday. Okay, again, no school on Monday, so I hope everyone has a fun and safe Memorial Day weekend, and I'll see everyone on Wednesday. All right, bye, period 7. Have a good one.
Bye.
Recording stopped.